One need not be anxious to propitiate each and every demigod and goddess, because the root of all of them is the personality of Godhead. As by pouring water on the root of the tree one serves and enlivens all the branches and leaves, so by rendering service unto the Supreme Lord one automatically serves every god and goddess without extraneous effort. The Lord is all-pervading, and therefore service unto him is also all-pervading. This fact is corroborated in the Skanda Purana as follows. Archita Deva Devase Shankachakra Gadadare Archita Sharva Deva Sur Yata Sharva Gato Hari. When the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, who carries in his hands a conch shell, wheel, club, and lotus flower, is worshipped, certainly all other demigods are worshipped automatically, because Hari, the personality of Godhead, is all-pervading. Therefore, in all cases, namely, nominative, objective, causative, dative, ablative, possessive, and supportive, everyone is benefited by such transcendental loving service to the Lord. The man who worships the Lord himself who is worshipped, the cause for which the Lord is worshipped, the source of supply, the place where such worship is done, etc., everything is benefited by such an action. Even during the annihilation of the material world, the process of bhakti yoga can be applied. Kalananasta pralaya vaniyam, the Lord is worshipped in devastation because he protects the Vedas from being annihilated. He is worshipped in every millennium or yuga, as is said in Srimad Bhagavatam 12.352. Kirtayad Yayato Vishnum Tretayam Yajato Makai Dvapare Paracharyayam Halautad Dari Kirtanat. In the Vishnu Purana it is written, Sahanistan Mahakchidram Samoha Sacha Vibramma Yam Muhurtam Sanam Vapi Vasudevam Na Chintayat. If even for a moment remembrance of Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is missed, that is the greatest loss, that is the greatest illusion, and that is the greatest anomaly. The Lord can be worshipped in all stages of life. For instance, even in the wombs of their mothers, Maharaja Prahlada and Maharaja Parikshit worshipped the Lord. Even in his very childhood, at the age of only 5 years, Dhruva Maharaja worshipped the Lord. Even in full youth, Maharaja Ambarisha worshipped the Lord. And even at the last stage of his frustration and old age, Maharaja Dhritarashtra worshipped the Lord. Ajamila worshipped the Lord even at the point of death, and Chitraketu worshipped the Lord even in heaven and in hell. In the Narasimha Purana it is said that as the hellish inhabitants began to chant the holy name of the Lord, they began to be elevated from hell towards heaven. Durvasha Muni has also supported the view Muchete Yam Namni Udite Narakopi. Simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord, the inhabitants of hell became released from their hellish persecution. So the conclusion of Srimad Bhagavatam, as given by Sukadeva Goswami to Maharaja Parikshit, is, O king, it is finally decided that everyone, namely those in the renounced order of life, the mystics, and the enjoyers of fruitive work, should chant the holy name of the Lord fearlessly to achieve the desired success in their pursuits. Srimad Bhagavatam 2.1.11. Similarly, as indicated indirectly in various places in revealed scriptures, 1. Even though one is well versed in all the Vedas and scriptures, if one is not a devotee of the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, he is considered to be the lowest of mankind. 2. In the Garuda Purana, Birhan Naradiya Purana, and Padma Purana, the same is repeated. What is the use of Vedic knowledge and penances for one who is devoid of devotional service to the Lord? 3. What is the comparison of thousands of Prajapatis to one devotee of the Lord? 4. Sukadeva Goswami said, Srimad Bhagavatam 2.4.17, that neither the ascetic, nor one who is greatly munificent, nor one who is famous, nor the great philosopher, nor the great occultist, nor anyone else can achieve the desired result without being engaged in the service of the Lord. 5. Even if a place is more glorious than heaven, if there is no glorification of the Lord of Vaikuntha or his pure devotee, it should at once be quitted. 6. The pure devotee refuses to accept all the 5 different types of liberation in order to be engaged in the service of the Lord. The final conclusion, therefore, is that the glories of the Lord must be always and everywhere proclaimed. One should hear about his glories, one should chant about his glories, and one should always remember his glories, because that is the highest perfectional stage of life. As far as fruit of work is concerned, it is limited to an enjoyable body. As far as yoga is concerned, it is limited to the acquirement of mystic power. As far as empiric philosophy is concerned, it is limited to the attainment of transcendental knowledge, and as far as transcendental knowledge is concerned, it is limited to attainment of salvation. Even if they are adopted, there is every chance of discrepancies in discharging the particular type of functions, but adoption of the transcendental devotional service of the Lord has no limit, nor is there fear of falling down. The process automatically reaches the final stage by the grace of the Lord. In the preliminary stage of devotional service, there is an apparent requisite for knowledge, but in the higher stage there is no necessity of such knowledge. The best and guaranteed path of progress is therefore engagement in bhakti yoga, pure devotional service. The cream of Srimad Bhagavatam in the foregoing 4 slokas is sometimes squeezed out by the impersonalist for different interpretations in their favor, but it should be carefully noted that the 4 slokas were first described by the personality of Godhead himself, and thus the impersonalist has no scope to enter into them because he has no conception of the personality of Godhead. Therefore, the impersonalist may squeeze out any interpretations from them, but such interpretations will never be accepted by those who are taught in the disciplic succession from Brahma, as will be cleared up in the following verses. Besides that, the Sruti confirms that the Supreme Truth, Absolute Personality of Godhead, never reveals himself to anyone who is falsely proud of his academic knowledge. The Sruti mantra clearly says, Katha Upanishad 1:2-23, Nayam Atma Pravachanena Labhyo Na Medaya Na Bahuda Srutena Yam Avaisa Vrinute Tena Labhyas Tasyaisa Atma Vivrinute Tanam Svam. The whole matter is explained by the Lord himself, and one who has no approach to the Lord in his personal feature can rarely understand the support of Srimad Bhagavatam without being taught by the Bhagavatas in the disciplic succession. Text 37. O Brahma, just follow this conclusion by fixed concentration of mind, and no pride will disturb you, neither in the partial nor in the final devastation. Purport. As in the Bhagavad Gita, 10th chapter, the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, has summarized the whole text in 4 verses, namely, Aham Sarvasya, Prabhava, etc. So the complete Srimad Bhagavatam has also been summarized in 4 verses as Aham Evasam Evagre, etc. Thus, the secret purpose of the most important Bhagavatite conclusion has been explained by the original speaker of the Srimad Bhagavatam, who was also the original speaker of the Bhagavad Gita, the personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. There are many grammarians and non-devotee material wranglers who have tried to present false interpretations of these 4 verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam, but the Lord himself advised Brahmaji not to be deviated from the fixed conclusion the Lord had taught him. The Lord was the teacher of the nucleus of Srimad Bhagavatam in 4 verses, and Brahma was the receiver of the knowledge. Misinterpretation of the word aham by the word jugglery of the impersonalist should not disturb the mind of the strict followers of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is the text of the personality of Godhead and his unalloyed devotees, who are also known as the Bhagavatas, and any outsider should have no access to this confidential literature of devotional service. But, unfortunately, the impersonalist, who has no relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, sometimes tries to interpret Srimad Bhagavatam by his poor fund of knowledge in grammar and dry speculation. Therefore the Lord warns Brahma, and through Brahma all future devotees of the Lord in the disciplic succession of Brahma, that one should never be misled by the conclusion of the so-called grammarians, or by other men with a poor fund of knowledge, but must always fix the mind properly via the parampara system. No one should try to give a new interpretation by dint of mundane knowledge. And the first step, therefore, in pursuance of the system of knowledge received by Brahma, is to approach a bona fide guru, who is the representative of of the Lord, following the Parampara system. No one should try to squeeze out his own meaning by imperfect mundane knowledge. The Guru, or the bona fide spiritual master, is competent to teach the disciple in the right path, with reference to the context of all authentic Vedic literature. He does not attempt to juggle words to bewilder the student. The bona fide spiritual master, by his personal activities, teaches the disciple the principles of devotional service. Without personal service, one would go on speculating like the impersonalists and dry speculators, life after life, and would be unable to reach the final conclusion. By following the instructions of the bona fide spiritual master in conjunction with the principles of revealed scriptures, the student will rise to the plane of complete knowledge, which will be exhibited by development of detachment from the world of sense gratification. The mundane wranglers are surprised that one can detach himself from the world of sense gratification, and thus any attempt to be fixed in God realization appears to them to be mysticism. This detachment from the sensory world is called the Brahma Bhuta stage of realization, the preliminary stage of transcendental devotional life, Parabhakti. The Brahma Bhuta stage of life is also known as the Atmarama stage, in which one is fully self-satisfied and does not hanker for the world of sense enjoyment. This stage of full satisfaction is the proper situation for understanding the transcendental knowledge of the personality of Godhead. The Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.20 affirms this. Evam prasana manasho bhagavad bhakti yogata bhagavad tattva vijnanam mukta sanyasa jayate. Thus, in the completely satisfied stage of life, exhibited by full detachment from the world of sense enjoyment as a result of performing devotional service, one can understand the science of God in the liberated stage. In this stage of full satisfaction and detachment from the sensory world, one can know the mystery of the science of God with all its confidential intricacies, and not by grammar or academic speculation. Because Brahma qualified himself for such reception, the Lord was pleased to disclose the purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam. This direct instruction by the Lord to any devotee who is detached from the world of sense gratification is possible, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 10.10. Tesham sattata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayantite. Unto the devotees who are constantly engaged in the Lord's transcendental loving service, Pritipurvakam, the Lord, out of his causeless mercy upon the devotee, gives direct instructions so that the devotee may make accurate progress on the path returning home, back to Godhead. One should not therefore try to understand these 4 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam by mental speculation. Rather, by direct perception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is able to know all about his abode, Vaikuntha, as was seen and experienced by Brahmaji. Such Vaikuntha realization is possible by any devotee of the Lord situated in the transcendental position as a result of devotional service. In the Gopalatapani Upanishad, Sruti, it is said, Gopavesha me Purusha Purustad Avirbabhuva. The Lord appeared before Brahma as a cowboy, that is, as the original personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, Govinda, who is later described by Brahmaji in his Brahma Samhita 529. Chintamani prakara sadmasu kalpavirksha lakshavteshu surabir abhipalayantam lakshmi sahasra satta sambrahma savyamanam govindam adipurusham tam aham bhajami. Brahmaji desires to worship the original personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, who resides in the topmost Vaikuntha planet, known as Goloka Vrindavana, where he is in the habit of keeping Sarabi cows as a cowboy, and where he is served by hundreds and thousands of goddesses of fortune, the gopis, with love and respect. Therefore, Lord Sri Krishna is the original form of the Supreme Lord, Krishnastu Bhagavan Svayam. This is also clear from this instruction. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is Lord Krishna, and not directly Narayana or the Purusha avatars, which are subsequent manifestations. Therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam means consciousness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, and Srimad Bhagavatam is the sound representation of the Lord as much as the Bhagavad Gita is. Thus the conclusion is that Srimad Bhagavatam is the science of the Lord, in which the Lord and his abode are perfectly realized. Text 38. Sukadeva Goswami said to Maharaja Parikshit, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, after being seen in his transcendental form, instructing Brahmaji, the leader of the living entities, disappeared. Purport. In this verse, it is clearly mentioned that the Lord is Ajna, or the Supreme Person, and that he was showing his transcendental form, Atmanorupam, to Brahmaji, while instructing him in the summarization of Srimad Bhagavatam in 4 verses. He is Ajna, or the Supreme Person, amongst Jananam, or all persons. All living entities are individual persons, and amongst all such persons, Lord Hari is supreme, as confirmed in the Sruta mantra, Nitya Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam. So there is no place for impersonal features in the transcendental world, as there are impersonal features in the material world. Whenever there is chetana, or knowledge, the personal feature comes in. In the spiritual world, everything is full of knowledge, and therefore everything in the transcendental world, the land, the water, the tree, the mountain, the river, the man, the animal, the bird, everything is of the same quality, namely Chetana, and therefore everything there is individual and personal. Srimad Bhagavatam gives us this information as the supreme Vedic literature, and it was personally instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to Brahmaji, so that the leader of the living entities might broadcast the message to all in the universe, in order to teach the supreme knowledge of Bhakti Yoga. Brahmaji, in his turn, instructed Narada, his beloved son, the same message of Srimad Bhagavatam, and Narada, in his turn, taught the same to Vyasadeva, who again taught it to Sukadeva Goswami. Through Sukadeva Goswami's grace, and by the mercy of Maharaja Parikshit, we are all given Srimad Bhagavatam perpetually to learn the science of the Absolute Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. Text 39. On the disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, who is the object of transcendental enjoyment for the senses of devotees, Brahma, with folded hands, began to recreate the universe, full with living entities, as it was previously. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, is the object for fulfilling the senses of all living entities. Illusioned by the glaring reflection of the external energy, the living entities worship the senses instead of engaging them properly in fulfilling the desires of the Supreme. In the Hari Bhakti Sudyodaya 13.2, there is the following verse. O devotee of the Lord, the purpose of the visual sense is fulfilled simply by seeing you, and to touch your body is the fulfillment of bodily touch. The tongue is meant for glorifying your qualities, because in this world, a pure devotee of the Lord is very difficult to find. Originally, the senses of the living entity were awarded for this purpose, namely to engage them in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, or that of his devotees. But the conditioned souls, illusioned by the material energy, became captivated by sense enjoyment. Therefore, the whole process of God consciousness is meant to rectify the conditional activities of the senses and to re-engage them in the direct service of the Lord. Lord Brahma thus engaged his senses in the Lord by recreating the conditioned living entities to act in the recreated universe. This material universe is thus created and annihilated by the will of the Lord. It is created to give the conditioned soul a chance to act to return home, back to Godhead, and servants like Brahmaji, Naradaji, Vyasaji, and their company become busy with the same purpose of the Lord, to reclaim the conditioned souls from the field of sense gratification and return them to the normal stage of engaging the senses in service of the Lord. Instead of doing so, i.e. converting the actions of the senses, the impersonalists began to make the conditioned souls senseless, and the Lord also senseless. That is improper treatment for the conditioned souls. The diseased condition of the senses may be treated by curing the defect, but not uprooting the senses altogether. When there is some disease in the eyes may be cured to see properly. Plucking out the eyes is no treatment. Similarly, the whole material disease is based on the process of sense gratification, and liberation from the diseased condition is re-engagement of the senses to see the beauty of the Lord, hear his glories, and act on his account. Thus Brahmaji created the universal activities again. Text 40. Thus, once upon a time, the forefather of living entities and the father of religiousness, Lord Brahma, situated himself in acts of regulative principles, desiring self-interest for the welfare of all living entities. Purport: one cannot be situated in an exalted position without having undertaken a regulative life of rules and regulations. An unrestricted life of sense gratification is animal life, and Lord Brahma, in order to teach all concerned within the jurisdiction of his generations, taught the same principles of sense control for executing higher duties. He desired the welfare of all as servants of God, and anyone desiring the welfare of the members of his family and generations must conduct a moral religious life. The highest life of moral principles is to become a devotee of the Lord, because a pure devotee of the Lord has all the good qualities of the Lord. On the other hand, one who is not a devotee of the Lord, however qualified he may be in the mundane sense of the term, cannot be qualified with any good quality worthy of the name. The pure devotees of the Lord, like Brahma and persons in the chain of disciplic succession, do not do anything to instruct their subordinates without acting accordingly themselves. Text 41. Narada, the most dear of the inheritor sons of Brahma, always ready to serve his father, strictly follows the instructions of his father by his mannerly behavior, meekness, and sense control. Text 42. Narada very much pleased his father and desired to know all about the energies of Vishnu, the master of all energies, for Narada was the greatest of all sages and greatest of all devotees, O king. Purport: Lord Brahma, being the creator of all living beings in the universe, is originally the father of several well-known sons, like Daksha, the Chatusanas, and Narada, in 3 departments of human knowledge disseminated by the Vedas, namely fruit of work, Karmakanda, transcendental knowledge, Jnanakanda, and devotional service, Upasanakanda. Devarishi Narada inherited from his father Brahma devotional service, whereas Daksha inherited from his father fruit of work, and Sanaka, Sanatana, etc., inherited from their father information about Jnanakanda, or transcendental knowledge. But out of them all, Narada is described here as the most beloved son of Brahma because of good behavior, obedience, meekness, and readiness to render service unto the Father. And Narada is famous as the greatest of all sages because of his being the greatest of all devotees. Narada is the spiritual master of many famous devotees of the Lord. He is the spiritual master of Prahlada, Dhruva, and Vyasa, down to the foremost animal hunter, Kirata. His only business is to turn everyone to the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Therefore all these features of Narada make him the dearmost son of his father, and all this is due to Narada's being a first-class devotee of the Lord. The devotees are always anxious to know more and more about the Supreme Lord, the master of all energies, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 10.9. Machchita madgata prana bodhyayanta parasparam katayantas chamam nityam tusyanti cham ramanti cha. The Supreme Lord is unlimited, and his energies are also unlimited. No one can know them completely. Brahmaji, being the greatest living entity within this universe, and being directly instructed by the Lord, must know more than anyone within this universe, although such knowledge may not be complete. Thus it is the duty of everyone to ask about the unlimited Lord from the spiritual master in the disciplic succession of Brahma, which descends from Narada to Vyasa, from Vyasa to Sukadeva, and so on. Text 43. The great sage Narada also inquired in detail from his father Brahma, the great-grandfather of all the universe, after seeing him well satisfied. Purport: the process of understanding spiritual or transcendental knowledge from the realized person is not exactly like asking an ordinary question from the schoolmaster. The schoolmasters in the modern days are paid agents for giving some information, but the spiritual master is not a paid agent, nor can he impart instruction without being authorized. In the Bhagavad Gita 4.34, the process of understanding transcendental knowledge is directed as follows: Tadvidi pranipattena paraprasnena sevaya upadakshyante te jnaninas tattvadarshana. Arjuna was advised to receive transcendental knowledge from the realized person by surrender, questions, and service. Receiving transcendental knowledge is not like exchanging dollars. Such knowledge has to be received by service to the spiritual master. As Brahmaji received the knowledge directly from the Lord by satisfying him fully, similarly, one has to receive the transcendental knowledge from the spiritual master by satisfying him. The spiritual master's satisfaction is the means of assimilating transcendental knowledge. One cannot understand transcendental knowledge simply by becoming a grammarian. The Vedas declare, Svetaspatara Upanishad 623, only one who has unflinching devotion to the Lord and to the spiritual master does transcendental knowledge become automatically revealed. Such relationship between the disciple and the spiritual master is eternal. One who is now the disciple is the next spiritual master, and one cannot be a bona fide and authorized spiritual master unless one has been strictly obedient to his spiritual master. Brahmaji, as a disciple of the Supreme Lord, received the real knowledge and imparted it to his dear disciple Narada, and similarly, Narada, as spiritual master, handed over this knowledge to Vyasa, and so on. Therefore, the so-called formal spiritual master and disciple are not facsimiles of Brahma and Narada, or Narada and Vyasa. The relationship between Brahma and Narada is reality, while the so-called formality is the relation between the cheater and cheated. It is clearly mentioned herewith that Narada is not only well-behaved, meek, and obedient, but also self-controlled. One who is not self-controlled, specifically in sex life, can become neither a disciple nor a spiritual master. One must have disciplinary training in controlling speaking, anger, and tongue, the mind, the belly, and the genitals. One who has controlled the particular senses mentioned above is called a Goswami. Without becoming a Goswami, one can become neither a disciple nor a spiritual master. The so-called spiritual master without sense control is certainly the cheater, and the disciple of such a so-called spiritual master is the cheated. One should not think of Brahmaji as a dead great-grandfather, as we have experience on this planet. He is the oldest great-grandfather, and he is still living, and Narada is also living. The age of the inhabitants of the Brahmaloka planet is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. The inhabitants of this small planet Earth can hardly calculate even the duration of one day of Brahma. Text 44. Thereupon the supplementary Vedic literature Srimad Bhagavatam, which was described by the personality of Godhead, and which contains 10 characteristics, was told with satisfaction by the father Brahma to his son Narada. Purport. Although the Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken in 4 verses, it had 10 characteristics, which will be explained in the next chapter. In the 4 verses, it is first said that the Lord existed before the creation, and thus the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam includes the Vedanta aphorism, Janmadi Asya is the beginning, yet the 4 verses in which it is said that the Lord is the root of everything that be, beginning from the creation up to the supreme abode of the Lord, naturally explain the 10 characteristics. One should not misunderstand by wrong interpretations that the Lord spoke only 4 verses, and that therefore all the rest of the 17,994 verses are useless. The 10 characteristics, as will be explained in the next chapter, require so many verses just to explain them properly. Brahmaji had also advised Narada previously that he should explain the idea he had heard from Brahmaji. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed this to Srila Rupa Goswami in a nutshell, but the disciple Rupa Goswami expanded this very elaborately, and the same subject was further expanded by Jiva Goswami, and even further by Sri Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura. We are just trying to follow in the footsteps of all these authorities. So Srimad Bhagavatam is not like ordinary fiction or mundane literature. It is unlimited in strength, and however one may expand it according to one's own ability, Bhagavatam still cannot be finished by such expansion. Srimad Bhagavatam, being the sound representation of the Lord, is simultaneously explained in 4 verses and in 4 billion verses all the same, inasmuch as the Lord is smaller than the atom and bigger than the unlimited sky. Such is the potency of Srimad Bhagavatam. Text 45. In succession, O king, the great sage Narada instructed Srimad Bhagavatam unto the unlimitedly powerful Vyasadeva, who meditated in devotional service upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, on the bank of the river Sarasvati. Purport. In the 5th chapter of the 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Narada instructed the great sage Vyasadeva as follows. O greatly fortunate pious philosopher, your name and fame are universal, and you are fixed in the absolute truth with spotless character and infallible vision. I ask you to meditate upon the activities of the personality of Godhead, whose activities are unparalleled. So in the disciplic succession of the Brahma Sampradaya, the practice of yoga meditation is not neglected, but because the devotees are bhakti yogis, they do not undertake the trouble to meditate upon the impersonal Brahman, as indicated here. They meditate on Brahma Paramam, or the Supreme Brahman. Brahman realization begins from the impersonal effulgence, but by further progress of such meditation, manifestation of the Supreme Soul, Paramatma realization takes place. And progressing further, realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is fixed. Sri Narada Muni, as the spiritual master of Vyasadeva, knew very well the position of Vyasadeva, and thus he certified the qualities of Srila Vyasadeva as fixed in the absolute truth with great vow, etc. Narada advised meditation upon the transcendental activities of the Lord. Impersonal Brahman has no activities, but the personality of Godhead has many activities, and all such activities are transcendental, without any tinge of material quality. If the activities of the Supreme Brahman were material activities, then Narada would not have advised Vyasadeva to meditate upon them. And the Param Brahma is Lord Sri Krishna, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. In the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna realized the factual position of Lord Krishna, he addressed Lord Krishna in the following words. Param Brahma Param Dhamma Pavitram Paramam Bhavan Purusham Sasvatam Divyam Adidevam Ajam Vibhum Ahustvam Rishaya Sarve Divarishir Naradastata Asita Devalo Vyasa Svayam Chaiva Bhavisyame. Arjuna summarized the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita by his realization of Lord Sri Krishna, and thus said, My dear personality of Godhead, you are the supreme absolute truth, the original person in the eternal form of bliss and knowledge, and this is confirmed by Narada, Asita, Devala, and Vyasadeva, and above all, your personal self has also confirmed it. Bhagavatam 10, 12-13. When Vyasadeva fixed his mind in meditation, he did it in Bhakti Yoga trance, and actually saw the Supreme Person with Maya, the illusory energy, in contraposition. As we have discussed before, the Lord's Maya, or illusion, is also a representation, because Maya has no existence without the Lord. Darkness is not independent of light. Without light, no one can experience the contraposition of darkness. However, this Maya, or illusion, cannot overcome the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but stands apart from him, apashrayam. Therefore, perfection of meditation is realization of the personality of Godhead, along with his transcendental activities. Meditation on the impersonal Brahman is a troublesome business for the meditator, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 12.5. Klesha dikataras tesham avyakta shakta chetasam. Text 46. O king, your questions as to how the universe became manifested from the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead, as well as other questions, I shall answer in detail by explanation of the 4 verses already mentioned. Purport. As stated in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, this great transcendental literature is the ripened fruit of the tree of Vedic knowledge, and therefore all questions that can be humanly possible regarding the universal affairs, beginning from its creation, are all answered in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The answers depend only on the qualification of the person who explains them. The 10 divisions of Srimad Bhagavatam, as explained by the great speaker Srila Sukadeva Goswami, are the limitation of all questions, and intelligent persons will derive all intellectual benefits from them by proper utilization. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta Purports of the 2nd Canto, 9th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Answers by Citing the Lord's Version. Chapter 10. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. Text 1. Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, in the Srimad Bhagavatam there are 10 divisions of statements regarding the following: the creation of the universe, sub-creation, planetary systems, protection by the Lord, the creative impetus, the change of manus, the science of God, returning home back to Godhead, liberation, and the summum bonum. Text 2. To isolate the transcendence of the summum bonum, the symptoms of the rest are described sometimes by Vedic inference, sometimes by direct explanation, and sometimes by summary explanations given by the great sages. Text 3. The elementary creation of 16 items of matter, namely the 5 elements, fire, water, land, air, and sky, sound, form, taste, smell, touch, and the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and mind, is known as sarga, whereas subsequent resultant interaction of the modes of material nature is called visarga. Purport. In order to explain the 10 divisional symptoms of the Srimad Bhagavatam, there are 7 continuous verses. The first of these under reference pertains to the 16 elementary manifestations of earth, water, etc., with material ego composed of material intelligence and mind. The subsequent creation is a result of the reactions of the above-mentioned 16 energies of the first Purusha, the Mahavishnu incarnation of Govinda, as later explained by Brahma in his treatise Brahma Samhita 547 as follows: Ya karanarnava jale bhajate smayoga nidramananta jagadanda saramakupa adara shaktim avalambya paramsva murtim govindam adipurusham tam aham bhajami. The first Purusha incarnation of Govinda, Lord Krishna, known as the Mahavishnu, goes into a yoga nidra mystic sleep, and the innumerable universes are situated in potency in each and every hair hole of his transcendental body. As mentioned in the previous verse, Srutana, or with reference to the Vedic conclusions, the creation is made possible from the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly by manifestation of his particular energies. Without such a Vedic reference, the creation appears to be a product of material nature. This conclusion comes from a poor fund of knowledge. From Vedic reference, it is concluded that the origin of all energies, namely internal, external, and marginal, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as explained herein before, the illusory conclusion is that creation is made by the inert material nature. The Vedic conclusion is transcendental light, whereas the non-Vedic conclusion is material darkness. The internal potency of the Supreme Lord is identical with the Supreme Lord, and the external potency is enlivened in contact with the internal potency. The parts and parcels of the internal potency, which react in contact with the external potency, are called the marginal potency, or the living entities. Thus the original creation is directly from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or Param Brahman, and the secondary creation, as a reactionary result of the original ingredients, is made by Brahma. Thus the activities of the whole universe are started. Text 4. The right situation for the living entities is to obey the laws of the Lord, and thus be in perfect peace of mind under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The manus and their laws are meant to give right direction in life. The impetus for activity is the desire for fruitive work. Purport. This material world is created, maintained, for some time, and again annihilated by the will of the Lord. The ingredients for creation and the subordinate creator, Brahma, are the first created by Lord Vishnu in his first and second incarnations. The first Purusha incarnation is Mahavishnu, and the second Purusha incarnation is the Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, from whom Brahma is created. The third Purusha avatara is the Ksirodakasayi Vishnu, who lives as the supersoul of everything in the universe and maintains the creation generated by Brahma. Shiva is one of the many sons of Brahma, and he annihilates the creation. Therefore, the original creator of the universe is Vishnu, and he is also the maintainer of the created beings by his causeless mercy. As such, it is the duty of all conditioned souls to acknowledge the victory of the Lord, and thus become pure devotees, and live peacefully in this world, where miseries and dangers are always in existence. The conditioned souls who take this material creation as the place for satisfaction of the senses, and thus are illusioned by the external energy of Vishnu, remain again to be subjected to the laws of material nature, creation, and destruction. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that beginning from the topmost planet of this universe down to the lowest planet, Patalaloka, all are destructible, and the conditioned souls may travel in space either by good or bad work, or by modern spacecraft. But they are sure to die everywhere, although the duration of life in different planets is different. The only means to attain eternal life is to go back home, back to Godhead, where there is no more rebirth as in the material planets. The conditioned souls, being unaware of this very simple fact because of forgetting their relationship with the Lord of Vaikuntha, try to plan out a permanent life in this material world. Being illusioned by the external energy, they thus become engaged in various types of economic and religious development, forgetting that they are meant for going back home, back to Godhead. This forgetfulness is so strong due to the influence of Maya that the conditioned souls do not at all want to go back to Godhead. By sense enjoyment they become victims of birth and death repeatedly, and thus spoil human lives, which are chances for going back to Vishnu. The directive scriptures made by the Manus in different ages and millenniums are called Saddharma, good guidance for the human beings, who should take advantage of all the revealed scriptures for their own interest, to make life's successful termination. The creation is not false, but it is a temporary manifestation, just to give a chance for the conditioned souls to go back to Godhead. The desire to go back to Godhead and functions performed in that direction form the right path of work. When such a regulative path is accepted, the Lord gives all protection to his devotees by his causeless mercy, while the non-devotees risk their own activities to bind themselves in a chain of fruitive reactions. The word Saddharma is significant in this connection. Saddharma, or duty performed for going back to Godhead, and thus becoming his unalloyed devotee, is the only pious activity. All others may pretend to be pious, but actually they are not. It is for this reason only that the Lord advises in the Bhagavad Gita that one give up all so-called religious activities and completely engage in the devotional service of the Lord, to become free from all anxieties due to the dangerous life of material existence. To work situated in Saddharma is the right direction of life. One's aim of life should be to go back home, back to Godhead, and not be subjected to repeated births and deaths in the material world by getting good or bad bodies for temporary existence. Herein lies the intelligence of human life, and one should desire the activities of life in that way. Text 5. The science of God describes the incarnations of the personality of Godhead and his different activities together with the activities of his great devotees. Purport. During the course of the existence of the cosmic manifestation, the chronology of history is created, recording the activities of the living entities. People in general have a tendency to learn the history and narratives of different men and times, but due to a lack of knowledge in the science of Godhead, they are not apt to study the history of the incarnations of the personality of Godhead. It should always be remembered that the material creation is created for the salvation of the conditioned souls. The merciful Lord, out of his causeless mercy, descends to various planets in the material world and acts for the salvation of the conditioned souls. That makes the history and narrations worth reading. Srimad Bhagavatam offers such transcendental topics of the Lord in relationship with great devotees. Therefore, the topics of the devotees and the Lord are to be given respectful oral reception. Text 6. The merging of the living entity, along with his conditional living tendency, with the mystic lying down of the Mahavishnu, is called the winding up of the cosmic manifestation. Liberation is the permanent situation of the form of the living entity after he gives up the changeable gross and subtle material bodies. Purport. As we have discussed several times, there are two types of living entities. Most of them are ever liberated, or nityamuktas, while some of them are ever conditioned. The ever conditioned souls are apt to develop a mentality of lording over the material nature, and therefore the material cosmic creation is manifested to give the ever conditioned souls two kinds of facilities. One facility is that the conditioned soul can act according to his tendency to lord it over the cosmic manifestation, and the other facility gives the conditioned soul a chance to come back to Godhead. So after the winding up of the cosmic manifestation, most of the conditioned souls merge into the existence of the Mahavishnu personality of Godhead, lying in his mystic slumber, to be created again in the next creation. But some of the conditioned souls, who follow the transcendental sound in the form of Vedic literatures, and are thus able to go back to Godhead, attain spiritual and original bodies after quitting the conditional gross and subtle material bodies. The material conditioned bodies develop out of the living entity's forgetfulness of their relationship with Godhead, and during the course of the cosmic manifestation, the conditioned souls are given a chance to revive their original status of life with the help of revealed scriptures, so mercifully compiled by the Lord in his different incarnations. Reading or hearing of such transcendental literatures helps one become liberated even in the conditioned state of material existence. All the Vedic literatures aim at devotional service to the personality of Godhead, and as soon as one is fixed upon this point, he at once becomes liberated from conditioned life. The material gross and subtle forms are simply due to the conditioned soul's ignorance, and as soon as he is fixed in the devotional service of the Lord, he becomes eligible to be freed from the conditioned state. This devotional service is transcendental attraction for the Supreme, on account of his being the source of all pleasing humors. Everyone is after some pleasure of humor for enjoyment, but does not know the supreme source of all attraction. Raso vaisa rasam he evayam labdvanandi bhavati. The Vedic hymns inform everyone about the supreme source of all pleasure. The unlimited fountainhead of all pleasure is the personality of Godhead, and one who is fortunate enough to get this information through the transcendental literatures like Srimad Bhagavatam becomes permanently liberated to occupy his proper place in the kingdom of God. Text 7. The Supreme One, who is celebrated as the Supreme Being, or the Supreme Soul, is the supreme source of the cosmic manifestation, as well as its reservoir and winding up. Thus he is the supreme fountainhead, the absolute truth. Purport. Synonyms for the supreme source of all energies, as explained in the very beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, are Janmadi Asya Yatta, Vadanti Tat Tattva Vidas Tattvam Yajjnanam Advayam Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavan Iti Sabdyate, called Parambrahma, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. The word iti used here in this verse completes the synonyms and thus indicates Bhagavan. This will be further explained in the later verses, but this Bhagavan ultimately means Lord Krishna, because the Srimad Bhagavatam has already accepted the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Krishna. Krishnastu Bhagavan Svayam. The original source of all energies, or the summum bonum, is the Absolute Truth, which is called Param Brahma, etc., and Bhagavan is the last word of the Absolute Truth. But even with the synonyms for Bhagavan, such as Narayana, Vishnu, and Purusha, the last word is Krishna, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo Mata Sharvam Pravartate, etc. Besides that, the Srimad Bhagavatam is the representation of Lord Krishna as a sound incarnation of the Lord. Krishna sva dhammapagate dharmajnana dibhi saha kalau nasta drishtam esa purunarko donodita. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.3.43. Thus, by general conclusion, Lord Krishna is the ultimate source of all energies, and the word Krishna means that. And to explain Krishna, or the science of Krishna, the Srimad Bhagavatam has been prepared. In the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, this truth is indicated in the questions and answers by Sutta Goswami and great sages like Sanaka, and in the first and second chapters of the canto this is explained. In the third chapter, this subject is more explicit, and in the fourth chapter, even more explicit. In the second canto, the absolute truth as the personality of Godhead is further emphasized, and the indication is the Supreme Lord Krishna. The summary of Srimad Bhagavatam in 4 verses, as we have already discussed, is succinct. This Supreme Personality of Godhead in the ultimate issue is confirmed by Brahma in his Brahma Samhita as Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha. So it is concluded in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The complete subject matter is elaborately explained in the 10th and 11th cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the matter of the changes of the Manus or Manvantaras, such as the Svayambhava Manvantara and the Chakshusa Manvantara, as they are discussed in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Krishna is indicated. In the 8th canto, the Vaisvasvata Manvantara explains the same subject indirectly, and in the 9th canto the same purport is there. In the 12th canto the same is further explained, specifically regarding the different incarnations of the Lord. Thus it is concluded by studying the complete Srimad Bhagavatam that Lord Sri Krishna is the ultimate summum bonum, or the ultimate source of all energy, and according to the grades of worshippers, the indications of the nomenclature may be differently explained as Narayana, Brahma, Paramatma, etc. Text 8. The individual person possessing different instruments of senses is called the Adhyatmic person, and the individual controlling deity of the senses is called Adidaivic. The embodiment seen on the eyeballs is called the Adibautic person. Purport. The supreme controlling summum bonum is the personality of Godhead in his plenary portion of Paramatma, or the Supersoul manifestation. In the Bhagavad Gita 10.42 it is said, Atava bandhunatena kim jnatana tavarduna vishtabhyaham idam krishnam ekamsena shtitog jagat. All the controlling deities like Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva are different manifestations of the Paramatma feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who exhibits himself in such manners by entering into each and every universe generated from him. But still, apparently, there are divisions of the controller and controlled. For example, in the food controlling department, the controller of food is a person made of the same ingredients as the person who is controlled. Similarly, each and every individual in the material world is controlled by the higher demigods. For example, we have our senses, but the senses are controlled by superior controlling deities. We cannot see without light, and the supreme controller of light is the sun. The sun god is in the sun planet, and we, the individual human beings, or any other being on this earth, are all controlled by the sun god as far as our eyes are concerned. Similarly, all the senses we have are controlled by the superior demigods, who are also as much living entities as we are, but one is empowered while the other is controlled. The controlled living entity is called the Adhyatmic person, and the controller is called the Adidaivic person. All these positions in the material world are due to different fruitive activities. Any individual living being can become the sun god, or even Brahma, or any other god in the upper planetary system, by a higher grade of pious work, and similarly, one becomes controlled by the higher demigods by lower grades of fruitive activities. So every individual living entity is subject to the supreme control of the Paramatma, who puts everyone in different positions of the controller and the controlled. That which distinguishes the controller and controlled, i.e., the material body, is called the Adibautic Purusha. The body is sometimes called Purusha, as confirmed in the Vedas in the following hymn, Sava esa Purusha na Rasamaya. This body is called the Anarasa embodiment. This body depends on food. The living entity which is embodied does not eat anything, however, because the owner is spirit in essence. The material body requires replacement of matter for the wearing and tearing of the mechanical body. Therefore, the distinction between the individual living entity and controlling planetary deities is in the Anarasamaya body. The sun may have a gigantic body, and the sun may have a smaller body, but all these visible bodies are made of matter. Nonetheless, the sun god and the individual person, who are related as the controller and the controlled, are the same spiritual parts and parcels of the Supreme Being, and it is the Supreme Being who places different parts and parcels in different positions, and thus the conclusion is that the Supreme Person is the shelter of all. Text 9. All three of the above-mentioned stages of different living entities are interdependent. In the absence of one, another is not understood, but the Supreme Being who sees every one of them as the shelter of the shelter is independent of all, and therefore he is the supreme shelter. Purport. There are innumerable living entities, one dependent on the other in the relationship of the controlled and the controller, but without the medium of perception, no one can know or understand who is the controlled and who is the controller. For example, the sun controls the power of our vision. We can see the sun because the sun has its body, and the sunlight is useful only because we have eyes. Without our having eyes, the sunlight is useless, and without sunlight, the eyes are useless. Thus they are interdependent, and none of them is independent. Therefore the natural question arises concerning who made them interdependent. The one who has made such a relationship of interdependence must be ultimately completely independent. As stated in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the ultimate source of all interdependent objectives is the complete independent subject. This ultimate source of all interdependence is the Supreme Truth, or Paramatma, the Supersoul, who is not dependent on anything else. He is svasrayasraya. He is only dependent on his self, and thus he is the supreme shelter of everything. Although Paramatma and Brahman are subordinate to Bhagavan, because Bhagavan is Purushottama, or the super-person, he is the source of the Supersoul also. In the Bhagavad Gita 15:18, Lord Krishna says that he is the Purushottama and the source of everything, and thus it is concluded that Sri Krishna is the ultimate source and shelter of all entities, including the Supersoul and Supreme Brahman. Even accepting that there is no difference between the Supersoul and the individual soul is dependent on the Supersoul for being liberated from the illusion of material energy. The individual is under the clutches of illusory energy, and therefore, although qualitatively one with the Supersoul, he is under the illusion of identifying himself with matter. And to get out of this illusory conception of factual life, the individual soul has to depend on the Supersoul to be recognized as one with him. In that sense also, the Supersoul is the supreme shelter, and there is no doubt about it. The individual living entity, the jiva, is always dependent on the Supersoul, Paramatma, because the individual soul forgets his spiritual identity, whereas the Supersoul, Paramatma, does not forget his transcendental position. In the Bhagavad Gita, these separate positions of the Jiva Atma and the Paramatma are specifically mentioned. In the 4th chapter, Arjuna, the Jiva soul, is represented as forgetful of his many, many previous births. But the Lord, the Supersoul, is not forgetful. The Lord even remembers when he taught the Bhagavad Gita to the sun god some billions of years before. The Lord can remember such millions and billions of years, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 7:26, as follows. Vedaham samatitani vartamanani charduna bhavishyani cha bhutani mam toveda na kaschana. The Lord in his eternal blissful body of knowledge is fully aware of all that happened in the past, that which is going on at the present, and also what will happen in the future. But in spite of his being the shelter of both the Paramatma and Brahman, persons with a poor fund of knowledge are unable to understand him as he is. The propaganda of the identity of cosmic consciousness with the consciousness of the individual living entities is completely misleading, because even such a person or individual soul as Arjuna could not remember his past deeds, although he is always with the Lord. And what can the tiny ordinary man, falsely claiming to be one with the cosmic consciousness, know about his past, present, and future? Text 10. After separating the different universes, the gigantic universal form of the Lord, Mahavishnu, which came out of the causal ocean, the place of appearance for the first Purusha Avatara, entered into each of the separate universes, desiring to lie on the created transcendental water, Garbhodaka. Purport. After analysis of the living entities and the Supreme Lord, Paramatma, the independent source of all other living beings, Srila Sukadeva Goswami is now presenting the prime necessity for devotional service to the Lord, which is the only occupational business of all living entities. The Supreme Lord Sri Krishna and all his plenary portions and extensions of plenary portions are non-different from one another, and thus the supreme independence is in each and every one of them. In order to prove this, Sukadeva Goswami, as promised to King Parikshit, describes herein the independence of the Purusha Avatara personality of Godhead, even in the sphere of the material creation. Such activities of the Lord are also transcendental, and therefore they are also Leela, or pastimes of the Absolute Lord. Such pastimes of the Lord are very conducive to the hearers for self-realization in the field of devotional service. Some may argue, why not then relish the transcendental Leela of the Lord, as exhibited in the land of Madhura and Vrindavana, which are sweeter than anything in the world? Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura replies that the pastimes of the Lord in Vrindavana are meant to be relished by advanced devotees of the Lord. Neophyte devotees will misunderstand such supreme transcendental activities of the Lord, and therefore the Lord's pastimes in the material sphere related to creation, maintenance, and destruction are verily relishable by the Prakrita, or mundane devotees of the Lord. As the yoga system based on bodily exercises is meant for the person who is too much attached to the bodily conception of existence, similarly the Lord's pastimes, related to the creation and destruction of the material world, are for those who are too materially attached. For such mundane creatures, the functions of the body and the functions of the cosmic world through physical laws in relationship with the Lord are also therefore included in understanding of the lawmaker, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The scientists explain the material functions by so many technological terms of material law, but such blind scientists forget the lawmaker. The Srimad Bhagavatam points out the lawmaker. One should not be amazed by the mechanical arrangement of the complicated engine or dynamo, but one should praise the engineer who creates such a wonderful working machine. That is the difference between the devotee and the non-devotee. Devotees are always full with praising the Lord, who directs the physical laws. In the Bhagavad Gita 9:10, the direction of the Lord upon the material nature is described as follows. The material nature, full of physical laws, is one of my different energies. Therefore it is neither independent nor blind. Because I am transcendentally all-powerful, simply by my glancing over material nature, the physical laws of nature work so wonderfully. The actions and reactions of the physical laws work on that account, and thus the material world is created, maintained, and annihilated again and again. Men with a poor fund of knowledge, however, become astonished by studying the physical laws, both within the construction of the individual body and within the cosmic manifestation, and foolishly they decry the existence of God, taking it for granted that the physical laws are independent, without any metaphysical control. The Bhagavad Gita 9:11 replies to this foolishness in the following words. The foolish men, Muddha, do not know the personality of Godhead in his eternal form of bliss and knowledge. The foolish man thinks of the transcendental body of the Lord as something like his own, and therefore he cannot think of the unlimited controlling power of the Lord, who is not visible in the acting of the physical laws. The Lord is, however, visible to the naked eyes of people in general when he descends himself by his own personal potency. Lord Krishna incarnated himself as he is, and played very wonderful parts as the Lord himself, and the Bhagavad Gita concerns such wonderful actions and knowledge. Yet foolish men will not accept Lord Krishna as the Supreme Lord. Generally, they consider the infinitesimal and infinite features of the Lord, because they themselves are unable to become either the infinitesimal or the infinite. But one should know that the infinite and infinitesimal sizes of the Lord are not his highest glories. The most wonderful manifestation of the Lord's power is exhibited when the infinite Lord becomes visible to our eyes as one of us. Yet his activities are different from those of the finite beings. Lifting a mountain at the age of 7 years and marrying 16,000 wives in the prime of his youth are some of the examples of his infinite energy. But the Buddhas, after seeing them or hearing about them, decry them as legendary and take the Lord as one of them. They cannot understand that the Lord Sri Krishna, although in the form of a human being by his own potency, is still the Supreme Lord, with full potency as the Supreme Controller. When, however, the Buddhas give submissive and oral reception to the messages of the Lord, as in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita or in the Srimad Bhagavatam, through the channel of disciplic succession, such Buddhas also become devotees of the Lord by the grace of his pure devotees. And for this reason only, either in the Bhagavad Gita or in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the pastimes of the Lord in the material world are delineated for the benefit of those men with a poor fund of knowledge. Text 11. That Supreme Person is not impersonal, and therefore is distinctively a Nara, or person. Therefore the transcendental water created from the Supreme Nara is known as Nara, and because he lies down on that water, he is known as Narayana. Text 12. One should definitely know that all material ingredients, activities, time, and modes, and the living entities who are meant to enjoy them all, exist by his mercy only, and as soon as he does not care for them, everything becomes non-existent. Purport. The living entities are the enjoyers of the material ingredients, time, modes, etc., because they want to lord it over the material nature. The Lord is the supreme enjoyer, and the living entities are meant to assist the Lord in his enjoyment, and thus participate in the transcendental enjoyment of everyone. The enjoyer and the enjoyed both participate in enjoyment, but deluded by the illusory energy, the living entities want to become the enjoyer like the Lord, although they are not meant for such enjoyment. The jivas, the living entities, are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita as the Lord's superior nature, or Paraprakriti, and so also it is mentioned in the Vishnu Purana. Therefore the living entities are never the Purushas or the factual enjoyers. As such, the spirit of enjoyment by the living entity in the material world is false. In the spiritual world, the living entities are pure in nature, and therefore they are associates in the enjoyment of the Supreme Lord. In the material world, the spirit of enjoyment of the living entities, by dint of their own actions, karma, gradually fades by the laws of nature, and thus the illusory energy dictates in the ears of the conditioned souls that they should become one with the Lord. This is the last snare of the illusory energy. When the last illusion is also cleared off by the mercy of the Lord, the living entity again becomes reinstated in his original position, and thus becomes actually liberated. For this attainment of liberation from the material clutches, the Lord creates the material world, maintains it for some time, 1,000 years of his measurement, as stated in the previous verse, and then again annihilates it by his will. The living entities are therefore completely dependent on the mercy of the Lord, and all their so-called enjoyments by scientific improvement are crushed into dust when the Lord desires. Text 13. The Lord, while lying on his bed of mystic slumber, generated the seminal symbol, golden in hue, through external energy out of his desire to manifest varieties of living entities from himself alone.